In regards to 9/11, with the technology used for aeroplanes, there's two things in my mind. Obviously, with if it's a hologram, how could they hit a building with a hologram? So was there something like a missile inside the hologram? Is my first question. And then second to that, how come some people said that they heard an aeroplane and some saying didn't hear an aeroplane? And how can they make audio technology happen? That's my thoughts on that day, really.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. So Andrew Johnson did a study called Going in Search of Airplanes in New York City. The study that he did is on his website, checktheevidence.com. And the reason he did the study was or the airplane. And the reason he did this is so that he could include it in Morgan Reynolds' court case to the Supreme Court.
Okay.
When Morgan Reynolds did his key tam with Dr. Judy Wood to challenge the official narrative. So obviously that case was never presented, shut down at the Supreme Court. And but anyway, that study's still there and it exists. And you find some really weird things where, just like you two are sitting right next to each other now, one person would see the plane and not hear it. The person standing right next to him would hear it but not see it. And so you're like, well, that's weird, right? So automatically some witness testimony, and you find a lot more witness testimony and it's all very similar. Some people heard it, some people saw it, like you said. And in my opinion is what was going on is, again, a form of it's the consumer version of it is called Audio Spotlight. Actually, it's now being sold in the consumer arena, I guess, the public arena, Audio Spotlight. And you can see a video of this being demonstrated on some college students where the professor basically has this little modulator, is what it is, and he's across the crowd of students. Each student hears this own thing in their head.
It's worth the $2,000. It's not our money. Now, the sound that you're hearing is being created in this beam. It almost sounds like it's coming from your head. So let me try to scan the whole audience here so everybody gets to hear this. Absolutely remarkable. Pete, are you getting it? Let's try to, wait, one more thing. Let's try to bounce it off the wall. Raise your hand if you can very clearly hear it. I'm going to try to bounce it off the wall. Look at where the hands are raised.
I mean, at least that's what it sounds like to them. To you, it sounds like it's in your head. And this is something Rick Clay had touched on before he passed away in his interview on, I think it was on Red Ice Radio. And he talked about Blue Blast Media. And it was this billboard set up where people would walk by it and they would hear things in their mind like, are you okay? What's there? What's going, like weird things. And it would sound like it was in your head. But what it actually is it's a way of it's basically directed energy, you know. I mean, it's a sound wave. In the sense that we, like me as an audio engineer, would understand a sound wave. Us humans can hear from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. Being low, bassy, and 20 high pitched, crystal glass or, someone screaming, I guess. And really that's limited. If you've been to a rock concert, then it's probably more like 18 to 18, right? So 18 hertz to 18K. And if you're a young child, you probably have closer to 20. They can hear better than us. So your hearing obviously can go down. Well, what way this Audio Spotlight thing works, and honestly, this is the same technology that's used in what people refer to as voice-to-skull technology or V2K weapons. And it's basically, the wave is not in that frequency of human hearing when the signal is first goes out and it's amplified. Only while the wave moves through the air, a modulator then modulates that wave, that sound wave, while it's in the air before it reaches you, and it gives you the impression that what you're hearing is basically in your head, and the person sitting right next to you can't hear it. And
okay.
that right, so that is directed energy, and that stuff for a while, but it's now made its way to consumer, but only, of course, to a degree. It's kind of like the active denial system, which was declassified in 2001, which is are these millimeter waves that basically make you feel like your skin's burning and you just have to move. You have no choice instinctively, like putting your hand on an oven. You move it because it's hot. And this stuff was declassified in 2001. Worked on it for at least a few years, at least prior to that. And really, if you look into it, they've been testing millimeter waves on people since the 70s. At least that's what we can find in the, that's public knowledge. And so it's all, again, a form of directed energy. That's the part that seems to be hard for people to understand. Rather it's, like you mentioned, if it's a hologram, the question you asked me, if it's a hologram, how could it then hit the building and make an impact? And that is why I came to the conclusion is that it's all part of the same weapon system. It's all part of, and I believe that Serge Monest knew about this weapon system. He's the one who first came up with the name Project Bluebeam for this false flag that he said NASA was involved with, and illusion technology and directed energy weapons. To me, it's all part of the same thing. So some people will say, and Mark Conlon and I have spoke about whether there was some sort of delivery system, right? And like you mentioned, maybe a missile. And I've even looked into things like these cigar-shaped UFOs, which there's a lot of evidence out there, but it's actually really hard to find. But there's these cigar-shaped UFOs. And if you look at the Luke Korchesny footage, it's the footage of it right in front of the building. And you literally, it's probably one of the best pieces of it, just sliding right in like butter, from a downward, looking up angle. And there's some weird things because he was using a Betamax tape at that time. So that's a magnetic tape. And as we know, because of Dr. Judy Wood's research, something was happening with the Earth's magnetic field at the time that these planes hit, not just when the buildings went down, but as well as the plane-shaped holes being created in the building. Something was happening with the Earth's magnetic field that was documented in Where Did the Towers Go? And obviously, whatever was happening with the Earth's magnetic field was affecting the magnetic tape in Luke Korchesny's camera, because you see these like purple scans. And I think that even digital cameras were being affected, not just the analog tape cameras, because you saw things like people like Ace Baker and Simon Shack tried to call fade to blacks, but these weren't fade to blacks. These were some type of transmission glitches or a cut in signal, a loss in signal, right as the plane impacted the building. And you saw this across the board. People who were watching it at home live got a cut as soon as the plane hit the building. And we have to remember that on the North Tower was a giant antenna, which is, for transmitting and receiving. It was used by television stations and news stations there. So I do think that it's possible that there was some sort of delivery system, but I think what's more likely is that it is all part of the same mechanism of directed energy weapons. Is whatever hit that building that looked like an airplane was a directed energy weapon. It was similar to what John Hutchison has done in his experiments. And the only difference being they found a way to introduce advanced optics. And it's funny because if we were really to dig deep into this, I can't tell you exactly what it was that was used and how they did it. Same way that Dr. Judy Wood can't tell you exactly what they call the weapon that turned it into dust and who pushed the button. But I can tell you it definitely exists. And it's funny because, not funny, but interesting how it's very interesting how Einstein talked about this thing, which maybe you guys are familiar with if you've done a little bit of physics research. It's called spooky action at a distance. Well, I found that really, interesting when I was a kid. I used to research this, and I found some things when I was digging into this advanced illusion technology where people would talk about action at a distance and ways of creating illusions. And if you get into the really esoteric part of it, you find that the archons back, ancient civilizations would talk about their leaders, and the archons, meaning, the masters, the leaders, the rulers, inducing virtual reality, basically false realities on their people. And so you have to ask the question, is that possible? Is this more of an esoteric, beyond technology thing, a mind, a psychological thing? And this is something me and Andrew have spoken in depth about. It seems that there are people on this planet that have the ability in some way to manipulate this ether and to basically, create some sort of false reality. And it seems like more than ever it's happening now with everything going on in current events. I mean, we've got a guy who's not an elected official named Bill Gates. He's not a scientist. He's basically a geek in a garage who came up with some software, and he's literally telling the governments and the leaders around the world what we should do right now, and we're all following it. And he says 7 billion of us need a shot if we want to go back to work. And I mean, talk about the Matrix. How did it come to this?
I mean, we always, going back to the archons, we always blame the archons, don't we? Call them gremlins, don't we? Always blame the archons. If anything, our electric equipment goes wrong, I mean, we had an instance once when it does make you think about this. Actually, something when you learn about it, you do think about it. So I remember we did an interview. It might have been with Mark Condon, actually. I think it might have been. Where our camera was full battery, and within 20 minutes, the battery was gone. And it was, really? And usually it's a good 2.5 hours at least you can get out of that battery. And it was full battery, and it went in 20 minutes, just as it was getting really into the deep. And we all looked at each other, thought, it's the archons, isn't it?
Yeah. The archons. So it's fascinating. Yeah, it's fascinating. I found that stuff, and I was like, wow. And it's just fascinating. And, some researchers like David Icke and a few others have talked about it, but very briefly. And it's fascinating for sure. It's the archons.
I mean, it's like just pass the blame to them,
It's great.
It does seem to happen a lot, I could be watching just a normal film or listen to music and nothing will go wrong. The moment we do anything like this sometimes, that's when it happens. That's when everything starts to get a bit weird,
Well, with the helicopters over my house at the same time that they were over Mark's house, my power was going out. It started, and that helicopter started coming back every single week. And every time it went over my house, my power would go out. And the film I was working on was hooked up to a hard drive that needed a power source, so it was plugged in. So if I was editing, it literally crashed my software. And I would even have to restart things, and it would set me back. And I was like, am I literally being sabotaged? And I kid you not, it just felt so coincidental with the timing of me becoming friends with John Lear. I had done an interview with Morgan Reynolds, and we had a great talk, and he gave me permission to use his court case in the film. And I only show little bits of it just because, again, I kind of feel like we're not going to get anywhere appealing to authority. The Supreme Court case was bound to be shut down. I think, what did they tell Dr. Judy Wood? I think they said that we're not going to hear any cases about the JFK or the moon landing or something, right? So it's like, that's what you're going to get when you appeal to the authority. And I realized that. So I really...
Lots of the evidence you've got, that's it, isn't it?
Yeah. And I really just felt like it's more important to kind of get a little bit of everything. I didn't want to focus on just the airplanes. I wanted to just show that really we can understand what happened, and even in that understanding, we have no idea. I mean, the scope of it, because if you go into which I showed just a little bit of in my film, the esoteric stuff, which is basically what people refer to as fringe or out on the edge, but it's like 2001: A Space Odyssey. How is it that he incorporated this monolith? And then you had these people pop up in Seattle in 2001, and they built a monolith on January 1st. And if you remember, Arthur C. Clarke said even decades later, he had no idea why Stanley Kubrick named the film 2001. But he said the intellectual minority of this world will recognize that January 1st, 2001 is the real beginning of the 21st century and the third millennium. And then on that day, a group set up this monolith in Seattle, and all these people were showing up. And when the news ran a story about them, they called them some people. They were only to be referred to as some people. And just recently, I heard Donald Trump getting up there talking about 9/11, and he said, "You remember some people, the story about some people? You remember that?" And then he moved on. And like, I don't know if he was giving a nod or if anyone else caught that, or if I'm literally just crazy and lost my mind. But I was like, did he just, and this some people and this thing with this monolith, and then you have the Hilton Hotel and the monolith next to the towers. So there's obviously something going on that we don't understand, that's a little bit higher than our understanding of what reality is. And to me, that ties into why we were able to see passenger airplanes that looked like passenger airplanes but behaved like UFOs. And so to me, and really what it goes back to answer your question of how is it a hologram? I don't think it's a hologram. I don't think that's the correct word to use. I think a scientific word to use would be three-dimensional volumetric object.
Right.
And I say object rather than image because, as you said, it seemed to have a physical property to it. And even beyond that, the research done by Gabe Valdez, Norio Hayakawa, and Greg Valdez out of Dulce, New Mexico, is all around UFO sightings and cattle mutilations. And they were of the opinion that basically this was happening as a psychological operation against the people of Dulce, New Mexico, the Archuleta Mesa. And so much misinformation and disinformation has been put out about that area, underground bases, housing aliens. But the evidence there is that there was illusion technology going on. The highway patrolman there came to that conclusion. Sadly, he passed away, and he put out a book. I don't know if are you guys familiar with that information?
Torture bases, the Valdez's,
Yeah. And so they were of the opinion and came to the firm conclusion. And I interviewed Norio Hayakawa, who also came to that conclusion that these UFO sightings were a product of illusion technology being done as part of a psychological operation, and somehow all the cattle mutilations tied in. And it's funny how with all that stuff I'd already been researching for 12 years now, while making my film, I just so happened to stumble upon the connection between these crop circles and Shanksville. Now, it was all because of Richard Hall, of course, and his connection between the iron and Andrew Johnson. They did a piece connecting the dots between some of the iron microspheres found in the soil in crop circles, similar to the iron microspheres found in the World Trade Center dust, right? So I saw that, and it made me wonder. It's not that it really made me think to go look at Shanksville. I just was already doing that for the film. And I was already seeing weird things like people reporting levitation, the phones going out, the power going out, similar to things we saw in New York at Shanksville. And I thought, why on earth would a plane crash cause someone to be levitated or cause the power outage miles away or cause the phones to stop working? That just didn't make sense to me. And then Mark Conlon pointed out some research that had been done years prior that no jet fuel was found. And I think this might have even been cited by Loose Change, right? So no jet fuel. So I just wanted to look into that because people said it was coming from the DPS, which is another authoritarian lab coat source, right? So, we can't really trust them. We know that. But they do put out information at times. So I look into the information. And so when I started looking into this, I just wanted to prove to people that there was no fuel in the soil. And I started finding that the water in that area, the water supply was contaminated with iron. And of course, there's already iron in the ground. So that was people were trying to debunk me with that on my blog. One in particular was the concerned grandpa, Steve Diak. He wanted to, that, oh, my source is coming from the authority, so it's nonsense. And his theory is that multiple missiles were used at all the sites to create the planes, and all the people who witness it are just lying, or they're either too stupid. And it's just, to me, it's ridiculous. I think me and Mark Conlon came to the conclusion that he is an actual page shill or some type of disinfo agent, because that is such an outrageous theory that people would just write it off immediately. I mean, it makes no sense. There's no evidence to back any of it up. And he's spending a lot of energy to debunk me, and he's calling me a Dr. Judy Wood minion, when all this research had nothing to do with Dr. Judy Wood. It was all mine and Mark Conlon's own research, totally separate of where did the towers go. We were looking into the planes. Mark Conlon specifically was looking deep into where the real planes went and the real passengers. And I cannot put that out on YouTube. If I put that interview out on YouTube, it's removed for hate speech. And it's because I believe that he's basically figured out where those passengers are. But anyway, getting back to Shanksville, I realized while looking at this that iron was contaminated all in the soil. And so it made me immediately, when I found that, I immediately thought back to that piece done by Richard Hall that mentioned the iron in the crop circles, and the evidence found in New York City. And so there seemed to be a connection there. And then Dr. Judy Wood has made some important points about the water features at New York and how they help to basically get rid of the ongoing energy effects, because it was fuming for months. And there's even a time lapse where someone put their camera out on the bay and just filmed, and it just, for months, it just fumed and fumed and fumed. And once they built this water feature, it seemed to get rid of some of these ongoing energy effects. And it turns out they built the same water feature at the Pentagon and in Shanksville, similar water feature, basically. And the water feature at Shanksville is doing something similar as New York City. It's pumping thousands and thousands of water into the soil basically every single day. And I don't know what it is, but for some reason, thousands and thousands of gallons of water being pumped in there somehow does something they need to stop the energy effects. And I really don't fully understand what it is that's going on, but it seemed enough of a coincidence to look more into it. And you start realizing that the in New York City is the same as the evidence in Shanksville, and that whatever created that plane-shaped hole in the ground was some form of this. And again, what's really important is people did see an airplane in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. They saw an airplane come down and crash into the ground. There's no doubt in my mind that that happened. And so it made me, again, connecting evidence to all three sites, where in regards to the airplanes, where people saw additional airplanes, planes either above or slightly, slightly off center. And this all depends on perspective and parallax, of course. So I had to do a lot of research into illusions and realize that, we don't know anything. Like, normal people don't know anything about illusions. If you're not an optical scientist, then you don't have a clue. And so that's why I love Richard Hall's quote, which is believe here in half of what you see, because you really can only believe half of what you see, because there are so many ways to create illusions. And I found that the Pentagon, New York City, testimony of someone saying that there's another airplane guiding the airplane into the building. We see this at the Pentagon. We see this at Shanksville, another airplane just 1,400 feet away. And then Richard D. Hall does his 3D analysis with radar data, and he takes the civilian radar data and the military radar data, and he does a complete 3D outline and makes a complete 3D model and does all 43. And this is the most definitive piece of evidence out there that proves not only did something hit those buildings, but the military and the civilian radar data were 1,400 feet apart. So it seemed as if there was another object, the object into the building. I don't know that that's true. I don't know that that's the case, but that's what it seemed like with that evidence, and it lined up with these witness testimony. And again, this made why on earth did Dylan Avery not talk about this in Loose Change when he had the document that said this? That document that he showed with the voice morphing technology actually mentioned other for the Air Force. And again, this was an Air Force document, quite fitting that we're in 2020 because this was an Air Force document 2020. It was called Air Force 2020. And even in that document, I think it's important that people read about virtual reality, something that wasn't even a thing, and now it's so popular in gaming. I mean, everywhere you have virtual reality. Even in the adult film industry now is virtual reality. I mean, and then and holograms are becoming more and more accepted. You've got Pepper's Ghost. It's the technology's there, and it's been there for a long. And that Air Force 2020 document, it has some very freaky things in it. I mean, just the cover has people wearing goggles and holographic planes in the air. And here we are in the middle of a global pandemic where all of us are non-essential, but the Space Force, I mean, why is it that we have to militarize space right now? Did the COVID come from? So no, tax dollars need to go to militarizing a Space Force. And if you guys look at the unveiling of the Space Force flag, I have no doubt in my mind that Donald Trump is talking about classified.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
He's looking off to the right. He's looking to the right, and you can feel the body language of that guy standing next to him, that general or whatever he is, giving him the nod to go ahead and talk about this classified technology. And what did Trump say? I call it the super duper missile.
Yeah. Yeah.
17 times faster than anything you guys know about. It's the super duper missile. I would argue what Trump is talking about there has already been there, and it was used on 9/11. Maybe it is a super duper missile.
Yeah.
That super duper missile that Trump's talking about is the delivery system. People are so scared to say that space weapons exist, and I think that's part of the problem. Ridiculed and called beams, and they talk about space beams. I think it'd be a lot easier, and a lot of the stuff would be easier for people to understand if we were just open and honest about it. Space weapons. It has not been completely secret. The Strategic Defense Initiative, the Star Wars program, these are all real things, and they went underground. The funding went to private corporations. It completely went away, and it's been there since. It's been up there. It's been kept secret. And honestly, we were in a peace treaty with Russia leading up to 2001 to the 9/11 attacks, and right afterwards, we left the peace treaty for space weapons. I mean, is that a coincidence? It's international. It's not one country. So I really don't like the 9/11 was an inside job as much as Dr. Judy Wood says it doesn't. To what really happened, I agree. I prefer to say 9/11 was an outsourced job by the military industrial complex. You can find the corporations that did it: SAIC, ARA, Boeing. I mean, everybody on the Directed Energy Professional Society was involved in some way or another in developing this technology that was used on that day.
That's it. But all the focus is on Bush and his administration, isn't it? That's where a lot in the truth movement. That's where they'll just focus on and the blame. Yeah. They won't go to the corporations that are behind the technology that was used, because a lot of them don't look there. And I do think that that's, again, it's a distraction. There's infiltration within the truth movement community.
Oh yeah,
that's what it's there for, isn't it? It's just
and you know what? Yeah, and just to speak on what you said about like people not talking about that it's corporations, this goes to the idea, and I think maybe it's misquoted. I think Snopes has tried to debunk it, but one of the people in the Nazi regime, it may have even been Hitler or his propagandist, said that people will never believe a small lie. They'll only believe the big lies because they will never fathom that it's possible that this big of lie could have been told. And so when you're told that it's just as simple as who invented 9/11 are the same people who were responsible for 9/11. It's such an obvious, right in your face truth that you would never believe it to be true. And that's why they've been able to get away with it. That's why the truth community has never pointed at those corporations that investigated it. They'll point at NIST, but NIST hired these people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And is it a coincidence that, Dan Sheckman found those quasi-crystals while he was working at NIST? That to me is not a coincidence. So again, these people fired him. They took these quasi-crystals. There was probably somebody at the top who said, oh, no. We're already working on that at Area 1. We've already had this Edgar Fouché guy come out and try to spill the beans once. We can't have this again. Fire Dan Sheckman. We can't have this. And then when it comes to use technology on September 11th, in a way, I don't know how these it's funny because gelatin, I'm sure you guys, you've seen the film, so gelatin is a recording material for holograms.
He came to the conclusion, just like I did, that companies like Sandia National Laboratories had been testing airborne holographic devices in a miniature style already in the early 1980s. Some form of holographic technology may have been used in the early 1980s at Dulce, New Mexico, to stage a miniature form of Project Bluebeam using some kind of holographic devices and convincing the local population of alien scenario, and may have staged some kind of a fake alien scenario using this device and creating the illusion of appearance of flying saucers over the Archuleta Mesa and surrounding areas.
And it just the name of that art group who went up in the area of the World Trade Center where it was actually hit and did this art project. And then you had what was the other one, E-Team with the helicopter, and it's all very weird Israeli, but to me that just ties right back to PSYOP for you to point at the Jews did it, or Israeli did it. It was all an Israeli Mossad operation, which they were totally involved, and so was our government. But there's an international entity way above the government, way above even the banking industry, that is responsible. I mean, David and Nelson Rockefeller built those towers so they could watch them be destroyed with people inside. Mm-hmm. David smiled about being able to watch those buildings destroyed with people inside, and he built them. Surely I would not be able to smile if something I built with my brother, decades before, was destroyed with people. That surely I'd be a little hurt or a little emotion. But that just shows you that they are indeed psychopaths. They are psychopathic. They have no empathy. And now we have more of them. The people can't understand this. It's multi-generational. Just because we have Bill Gates, he's just carrying on Gates Senior's, Bill Gates Senior's goals. It's the same way that David's daughters are carrying on goals, the same way David Jr. This is a multi-generational plan that is meant to happen. It is the New World Order, and 9/11 was a step of that. It's authoritarian, top-down government control, Agenda 21, which was pushed forward to Agenda 2030, and you get these keywords like sustainable, but it's really unleash. I think that they believe that we don't deserve the technology and that we can only have it in a slave system, and then we will get this technology, because otherwise the technology is going to be the only thing we've seen. And 9/11 is the greatest example of it being used in the very worst way.
Yeah, and it's almost as if like they look as if we're not deemed to understand this technology. It's not for us to understand. It's almost like, oh, they don't understand it. We'll just use it, the way we want to use it. They are psychopaths, aren't they? Really, I mean,
Yeah.
and I think people find it difficult as well to kind of relate to that, because not many people know psychopaths on that level, so they can't really relate that that's what they are. But all you got to do is, like you say, you can see their actions and you can see their responses, and there's no empathy there. So there it is.
Yeah.
It's but people have trouble with it for some reason, but they are.
If you know a psychopath, you can watch that video of David Rockefeller talking about I was there and I saw it destroyed, or you can watch George Soros when he talks about I do not look at the social there to make money. That's lack of empathy. Simple as that. You don't care about your fellow human being. And these are philanthropists. And so the problem we have now, just to get off of, we can 11 in the technology. I think it's important. I'm glad you guys are interested in that, and I'm glad I want to wake other people up to that. But I think what's even more important is we are now at the next step. So while we've researched JFK for 50 plus years, we've researched 9/11 for 20 plus years, people like you and I have tried to wake people up for decades now. And at this point, they're sitting back laughing. They've already taken the next step. Here, of a global pandemic with our freedom stripped away. And it's not like 9/11 where we're watching it on our television. Now it's right here in our backyards where we can't wear a mask to go to we have to go to the grocery store and wear a mask, right? And so I think it's important that people just realize that, like, this technology exists. And again, like, those the idea that, like, they're psychopaths, but they're also just people, right? That we've given the authority to, that we prop up, on a pedestal.
Yeah, we've given the power by giving it away. Yeah, exactly. It's, and that's another thing people don't realise, do they? They don't fully understand that the power is with them, with us. That we give our freedoms away, we give our power away to them. Like I say, we prop them up. So we've got to kind of almost look at ourselves as well, of collectively what we're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
If we don't, then it's just going to continue. As a collective, we've got to look within, and then we can start to do things. So
I agree. That's why I'm not sticking on the details anymore. When it came to 9/11, there was all these details, right? It was like, okay, so who did this, who did that, what's nanothermite versus directed energy, versus I think those things are important to some degree, but once it's getting to a point where we're literally having all of our freedom stripped from us, we're being lied to on a daily basis, we're being manipulated, mind controlled into a slave system that's happening right in front of us, and it's been scaled up now to where it's happening faster than ever. It's at some point we have to stop talking about the details of who did what exactly mechanism is what is this called and what is that called, what's the scientific term, and just realize we're being lied to by psychopaths. And and even if we were to go on like a law thing, where we were to go on, is it lawful? Let's look at conflicts of interest in COVID-19, right? So we have all of these people who have done these simulations, and they're the same people who are now the leading authority of what we do and how we respond. Well, going back to what we said, know who a psychopath is, or how do you know if someone is a psychopath? Well, their lack of empathy. That is the actual definition of psychopathy, is lack of empathy. So you see George Soros saying, I don't feel bad for what I do. I'm there to make money. I don't even think about consequences. And then you have people like Bill Gates, and then you have people like Rockefeller, David, and what he said with the towers. Say, okay, these guys are psychopaths, right? Really, that sums it up. It's part of they fit the definition. You could put their picture in there next to Webster's, and the Webster's right next to it, right? Okay, but then look at their job title. They are. Look at the definition of philanthropy: to make the world a better place. It is literally to do good and to be nice to human beings, to make human beings live in a better world. for human life. That is the goal and definition of a philanthropist. And every single philanthropist we have, damn near, that is propped up on a pedestal and put on the media is a psychopath
Yeah.
who believes in nothing controlling us.
Yeah.
Like some evil scientist out of a horror movie bent on world domination.
That's the inversion, isn't it? You know, they're given a, you know, kind of a role to play that people latch onto, and they assume that in this reality, but you know, that's not what they really are. But you know, that's the public perception of them, isn't it? And it's but you know, when you look at it, it's so easy to see through that. You know, from coming from where we're coming from, you know, kind of shaking. I'm thinking, why don't people see this? But I mean, I think what we're seeing is a lot of people now are seeing that, especially with Bill Gates. I think it's so obvious that so many people now are beating down Bill Gates that probably didn't question authority before. And that gives me a bit of hope, you know, that they're now people are seeing this and maybe can grow on that, you know. So
and his authority doesn't even exist. It's not even real. He just has money. I mean, he's not an elected official. We haven't put him there.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, you know, and a lot of people are realizing that now, and, you know, and hopefully that can move us to the next phase of getting things done for us, for humanity, you know. So
yeah,
I mean,
that's why it's important, like what you guys are doing, Unite Planet. It's important. It's important to spread that message of uniting us and bringing us together. It's important to talk about 9/11 and to understand 9/11 and that advanced technology was used. But what's even more important right now, what everybody needs to understand, is that the technology used on 9/11 still exists. It's still been kept secret. Most people still don't know about it. And it's ready to be used at a moment's notice, and it probably will be. And it's important for people to just understand that, and also to understand that right here, if you know about that, then you are a threat. And if you're up here talking about QAnon or talking about Trump or lock Hillary up or Obama or globalist, Satanist, pedophiles, you're not getting anywhere. Hollywood did this. Like Epstein's not alive. Epstein's dead. He was murdered. Like all these things get us nowhere. And only thing that really I've noticed, all these big YouTubers, I mean, I can name them off: the Crow House, Max Egan, Mark Passio, Dan Dix, Luke Radowski. These truther YouTubers that you see, they're getting out there. And I'm not saying that these people are disinfo. They're putting out good truth. In a lot of cases, like Max Egan, for example, he's one of the only people left can actually listen to who makes any kind of sense. A lot of these other people have either truthers became Trumpers, or they're just furthering the agenda, whether knowingly or unknowingly. But the problem I've seen of this, only to a degree, some of it's being censored. And I'd even argue that they're purposely censoring. And they talked about this in the Event 201 thing. So I would argue Brian Rose of London Real is purposefully being censored on purpose. And actually making a video about him because somehow he was able to hijack my Facebook account after I wanted to subscribe so I could watch the Rose David Icke interview. And he hijacked my Facebook and sent a petition to sign on my behalf. And I would never sign a petition, let alone send it to my friends. And so, and this guy wears a red tie. He's got his red, in his
pocket,
and he signs it. And like, first of all, a well-dressed man would never match pocket square with his tie. I think that's kind of a weird, I don't know what's going on there. But then he signs his name, Brian Rose, and the rose in red and all of the London Real. I think, if you ask me, part of that whole secret, you know, the Rosicrucianism, and I don't trust that guy at all. But David Icke, and they allow it because of the reptilian thing, maybe, you know, I don't know. He's a man of mystery. Me and a friend were just recently talking, a good friend from the UK, actually, we're talking. It's funny because most of my friends are from the UK. You guys are a little easier to talk to. Sometimes I just think that Americans get stubborn, especially when Trump came along. A lot of truthers just decided, well, Trump's draining the swamp, and haven't actually sit back and looked at what he's really doing.
Yeah, we've heard about that,
Yeah, I mean, we've heard a lot, but the key is like all these things are so weird and intertwined. We don't understand them. You've got Jared Kushner working on the Purge movie, and the Purge movie shows people running around for the election year is "Keep America Great," and now you have Trump with the campaign slogan of "Keep America Great." And Jared Kushner hires the PR specialist from the Purge movie, so "Keep America" movie from 2016. Now here we are in "Keeping America Great" in election year, literally purging on the streets, literally people running around wearing masks. It's like it's more than predictive programming. This is like a total magic trick being performed, a huge multi-generational decade-long magic trick being performed right in front of our eyes with super advanced technology. And what's important for people to realize is that's what's being shut down. My YouTube, I can't post. I've literally had tape put over my mouth. It is a horrible feeling to not be able to speak my truth, especially when I just got fired from my job. I literally am just now feeling the effects after all of this, after trying to fight through it and stay in the city, a citywide curfew at 7 p.m. The sun's still out, and I can't take my son outside to eat because there's a curfew and cops are screaming at us and shooting us. I don't have it in front of me, but I got hit with a rubber bullet while I was filming. And it's like, it's the middle of the day in the city. And I try to persevere through it all. But once I got laid off from one of my major sources of income, I still have freelance video work. I do work for, just so you guys know, and so the viewers know, I do video work and media work for human rights victims. So I'll do free work. If you need exposed, you're trying to get your story out there. I've worked with people for free for that purpose. And that's, I still luckily have a little bit of freelance stuff that I can do, but it got to a point where I realized I need, because it's not going to be good for people that are in the city. Because if you really, really read the research, if you really download Agenda 21, the original, and read it, it outlines steps that are being taken towards. And if you read Agenda 2030, it's the same thing. And this sustainability, and you've got Greta Thunberg, or whatever her name is, with her Nobel Peace Prize now. It's like, it's insane. What's going on is, a lot of people, the climate change talk is so hard for people, right? Because it's politicized now, Republican, Democrat, this whole division, like you guys talked about in the beginning of this video, is that's the purpose there. And that was talked about in these agendas, it's part of the divide and conquer. And when, like me and Andrew Johnson talked about this, even if climate change, even if global warming is real and climate change is a thing that is happening, it is not our fault. And that's the key for people to understand. You don't have to say either climate change is a hoax or it's real. The point is it's not our fault. They say, oh, it's because of emissions and CO2 and this, that, and the other. Well, they force us to put this gasoline in our cars. If they want climate, a Tesla, but that's not going to happen. And the people, the real inventors who have actually tried to give everyone a Tesla, who've tried to make cars that run off of hydrogen fuel cells or water powered cars like Stan, really died mysteriously. So I don't buy that Elon Musk is this new age Tony Stark, real life Iron Man, bringing us all this great technology. He's a front man, because only a CIA agent would name their firstborn kid after a declassified CIA program, which he went on the Joe Rogan show and said his kid's name. And it's like, you have to be CIA. Like, there's like Elon was truly this person who's going to take us to Mars and bring us these awesome cars and free energy for all. He would have been killed just like Stanley Myers, just like Joseph Newman, just like you. I mean, we can go on for days. There are so many people Nikola Tesla even, and now you have him with his Tesla cars, and you have a competing company with called Nikola, which I was like, are you kidding me? Just totally hijack this guy's name, rip it apart and sell it as luxury vehicles. And it's ridiculous, because this technology could, like you guys said in the beginning, world. It could literally change the world. It could end all war. And it's like I talked about with Andrew Johnson. We are forced to put this gas in our car. We are forced to pay these electric bills. We're forced to do all of this is the people. So if climate change is a thing, it is not our fault. Give us the technology that we know exists and has been weaponized, and we will eliminate climate change. We will famine, poverty, and everything. We would eliminate all of those things if that technology was given to us. But then again, that's where the paradigm shift comes in. That's when you need a shift in consciousness for people to actually understand ability. That's what Tesla wanted. Nikola Tesla wanted us to express our creativity, not to be slaves to an energy financial system, which is what we are. The Rockefeller and Rothschilds, as much as people are tired of hearing those names, the Rockefeller family has owned the energy of this world since the beginning, and the Rothschild has owned the banking. And you use the banking, the dollars that they print, to buy, and then we just keep on working up that pyramid. And then only once we stop putting our money in the bank, stop buying that energy, and we pull our stuff out and we say no more, are we going to prop up this triangle where we move out the way that pyramid comes tumbling down. That's the only way. We can only stop it. The only way it's able to keep going is by us, and the only way it's able to stop is by us. But we have to unite the planet.
Exactly. And I think that's what you've just described there is exactly why, with the truth behind 9/11, is why it's so, vilified when you put out the truth, because this is the implications for humanity it can bring. They don't want that, and
indeed.
And this is exactly what you've just wrapped up there, just encompasses all that. This is why, sometimes we'll talk about 9/11 and some people go, 9/11, that was so many years ago, we don't need to discuss that anymore. Well, yes, we do, because, because of just the implications of it. It's so important, just as much now as it ever was.
Yeah, we need people to understand that the technology that was used on 9/11 to destroy those buildings, to create the plane-shaped holes, that it still exists, it's still in secret, and that if you talk about it, chances are, if you know about it, you will probably be being censored. And that's the real reason. Now, what is it that I'm saying in my videos that the other people on YouTube who aren't being censored are saying? I have 3,000 subscribers. I'm not reaching the masses. Other people are getting police state. They're talking about the problem, reaction, solution, Hegelian dialectic. They're talking about the global cabal, the Illuminati. They're talking about globalists. They're talking about the same sort of things, the New World Order that I'm talking about. But the thing they're not talking about is the technology. And even if they are talking about the technology, they don't have a full understanding. They haven't put out a 3-hour documentary that shows that this technology is there. It's beyond our comprehension. And I think that's the important thing, is that once you realize that Project Bluebeam, if that's what you want to call it, is a real thing, then you become a threat. Once you start telling people that, then you become a threat. Once you start showing real evidence, like real true evidence that this technology exists and it will be used for this purpose, then you become a threat. And that's why I've been shut down. That's why I had to launch the website. So I relaunched wolfclanmedia.org just to put censored videos up, because they're shutting me down on YouTube now. And, I only started YouTube to get truth out. If I wake one person up who didn't know before, then I'm happy.
Yeah.
And they someone, because what good does it do all of us walking around talking about the same things that we already know about? Follow me, subscribe, hit the thumbs up, become a Patreon, do this and that. What good does that do?
Exactly. Yeah.
Unite planet. That's why I love you guys. Like, what you guys do is great. I love just your logo and your name, Unite Planet. Just that right there, I've always thought is such a great way, because that's what we need. It's like, even David Icke said it recently. He said, there's 10 times as many of us as there are them. I see a way out of this. He's right there. There's your way out of this.
And that's it.
All the energy from these George Floyd protests and aim it in the right direction. If we just took all this energy and aimed it in the right direction, even if we were armed, we would never have to fire our that energy. It's a living organism. If we were all together, we could stop it, and we could demand that we take control of that technology.
Totally agree.
Wishful.
Totally agree. And we can keep going, and we can hope that that's going to be a reality soon. I think it's a good place to end.
I think so. Yeah,
But,
thank you very much.
This has been amazing, Chris. Thanks so much for giving me time for this chat, and the stuff that you've brought to this podcast here has been incredible and
Brilliant.
so it's brilliant to have you on our show today. What you brought has been fantastic. I know we've been promising to do something for about a year now, haven't we? So it's great that we managed to get together and do this. So it's been great.
We've got time now.
Yeah. So it'd be great to do this again, as well as the round table. It'd be great to have another chat with you as well sometimes. Another time, it'd be brilliant, and keep up with the great work. The stuff that you put out is just, it's great, and we always watch your stuff. We think it's great. The 9/11 album is just one of for me, it's one of the best 9/11 documentaries out there. I'm not saying because you're here. I do believe that.
Me too.
This is what we think.
I believe you. I believe you because
no, it's true. It is.
I mean, thank you. I mean, I really appreciated it. That was so much work went into it. So much work went into it, and it's one of those things where it at times it got discouraging. It affected things in my life, and I was like, I have to finish it. I have to put it out. I just have to. And now that it's out, I'm just glad it's out.
Yeah. It's a remarkable job. So brilliant. And thank you for today as well. Thank you very much.